So first of all, I just want to again formally thank everybody for being here. You know, FountainHead, Rhode Island, we're in our 10th year. It's hard to believe. Last year was our first crack at doing the climate Stocktake, and the success was really, really beyond what we thought. We said, hey, let's go bigger, because why shouldn't the smallest state have one of the most impactful and biggest climate events out there? And a testament to that will be some of the keynote speakers we're going to have come up before our panels. So we've got people, as you saw here, from all over the world, the United Kingdom, Germany, Australia, and then of course representing the continental US. So make sure you take the time to check out the different exhibitors and see what they're all about, and check out their prototypes. And with that, I'll give everybody one more second, and then we're going to welcome Governor McKee to the stage to give opening remarks for the event. So just, if you don't mind, please make your way up front. So ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together as we officially kick off the event. The 76th governor of the great state of Rhode Island, Dan McKee. Governor McKee.
Well, hello, and I see Stefan here and Jim here, so Commerce is well represented. And so if you're from out of state, just raise your hand so I get a sense on who I'm talking to here. All right, so welcome. Welcome to Rhode Island, and I've just got a kind of a quick tour of some of the businesses there that talking about issues that are really important to our state. Jim Bennett's here also. Jim's our president of our Commerce as well, and I know that you were on a call with Senator of the White House, you know, like on a virtual call with him, and as well as I think that the Congressman Amos headed over, and a Speaker of the House I hear is going to be dropping by too. So this is my point is this for us. This is an all-in effort in Rhode Island to address energy issues, but really with a focus on clean energy, right? So we have an Act on Climate legislation that I signed that says that we're going to meet certain decarbonization goals by 2030, 40, 50. It'd be interesting to see what's coming out of Washington today in terms of how that impacts those challenges, but we're still focused on addressing those issues and making sure that we're doing things that'll also be good for our economy. So it's kind of a match that we need to make sure that we are really balancing the economic opportunity in the state with the idea of clean and renewable type of energies that we're definitely committed to. And I'll just say that for those who are outside the state and looking to invest in the state, we really are open to that. There's no question about that. But we also want to know that when we make the investments, we're really following a plan that I've put in place now for the last 3 or 4 years. And former Secretary Pryor here from Commerce helped us start this Rhode Island 2030 plan. And I think that each piece really fit in terms of the energy issues that we're definitely focused on. One is that we want to make sure that we really raise our academic outcomes for our young people in the state. We know that as we grow different industries, we're going to need a really highly skilled talent pool. And so that's one of the main things. And then the other one is that we really want to raise incomes in the state of Rhode Island, a very intentionally strategy to raise incomes. And part of that is we really want to make the package about home ownership. We want people to own their own homes. And we want to make sure we're expanding that opportunity so that there's a certain amount of wealth that gets built up as over a period of time. And then we want to make sure that we're healthy. We want to make, so a wellness strategy in the state's important to us because, and I think that's a lot of has to do with clean energy sources. Certainly that creates healthy communities. So I would say that we are making progress in the state of Rhode Island. Since I've been governor, we've moved up, I think, 10 spots on the states that are ranked by the U.S. News and World Report in terms of, states that are good places to be. So we've moved up, I think, from 34th to 24th, 24. We still got a little work to do on some of our education pieces and infrastructure pieces, but on the economy side, we are moving very, very quickly. And as Stefan always let me know, we're one of the fastest recovering economies, coming out of COVID. So this is a good place to invest your time. And I want to just congratulate David and the whole, group on the FountainHead Rhode Island climate Stocktake. 10 years, right, David? 10 years. Come on up here. I got a little recognition for you. So I get to go around as governor to speak on behalf of the people of the state of Rhode Island, and I wanted to just yes, that'd be good. So I wanted to just recognize you and in honor of your 10th anniversary, promoting growth, benefiting the state of Rhode Island, and providing opportunities for over 1,200 rising stars and current industry and business leaders from various sectors and industries from around the country. This is a celebration. It's a big occasion, and I'm pleased to issue this special recognition certificate to you. And what a group that you've assembled here. I get the flavor of what's being represented in terms of not only in the region but nationally and internationally, and that's something that we feel is really important to us. I think our lieutenant governor's here too as well. Where's Sabina? Sabina's hanging around here somewhere. But anyways, congratulations. Give Jason and David a little round of applause for a little recognition. Thank you so much. And we appreciate the fact that you had me here today, and happy to, we're going to take a little tour around, right, David? And meet some people and share some of the things that are happening in our state. But welcome to Rhode Island, those who have, has anybody been here for the first time in Rhode Island? Oh, yeah. Our weather is a lot better than what you're experiencing right now. And I get to, I do enjoy trying to get a couple 9-hole rounds of golf in, 18-hole, and today I'm not playing. So, but I'm in a better spot right here. So welcome to you all. And then Rhode Islanders, yeah. Well, thank you so much for the, we think that each community, all 39 cities and towns are really important, and they're very much focused on the work that we're doing in those key areas of education, raising incomes, health. And then, by the way, people are investing in Rhode Island at a very rapid rate. We just opened up a life science hub, a company called Organogenesis, which is putting about $100 million into a life science building in Smithfield, Rhode Island right now. That's just one example of the billions of dollars, literally billions of dollars. Remember, Rhode Island is, doesn't have a large footprint, right? We got a big backyard called the Atlantic Ocean, and we're happy that the Revolution Wind is going to be up and running by the end of 26. We feel it's going to electrify for Rhode Island about 250,000 homes at a very good rate in terms of the energy cost, and those are examples of the billions of dollars that are being invested as we speak. So if you're coming from a larger state, you got 1 million people. If you got 10 million people, that would be like 10 times as much of the. We probably have $6 to $8 billion of work that's in the pipeline right now, going through our infrastructure, private investment, our schools, our colleges, cybersecurity school that we've opened up at Rhode Island College under the leadership of former Congressman Langevin. It's already nationally designated. Our goal is to build a school there, and then have 1,000 students there graduating, 250 a year in just a few years. And then the life science issues that are going down at URI, our oceanography issues. You see the company right here that's we Flux, that we actually put some dollars in commerce. Is Flux hanging around here somewhere? Yeah, that's good. Thank you so much, Flux. So those who are thinking about investing in Rhode Island or bringing your business in here, we will just certainly roll out the red carpet. And then those who are currently in business right now, we don't forget you either. I'm a small business guy myself, many years in small business, and we know how important it is to work with our small business, David, making sure that the opportunities there, because we know that our business community plays a major role in terms of the strength of the cities and towns that make up Rhode Island. So thank you so much for having me here today.
Give it up for Governor McKee. Thank you. And by the way, the Lieutenant Governor was in the back, and this is speaking to the testament of this event. She's meeting with representatives that are here exhibiting from the Caribbean, Office of Tourism. You think about circular economy in sister cities, and the blue economy opportunity is right there. And give a shout out to the team in the back. They're doing great work. I will say to everybody standing, there's seats here. So I'm going to introduce our next keynote speaker, but feel free to fill in. There's opportunities to sit down. And up next for brief remarks, and I'll tell you this event, we've been honored and thrilled to partner with Commerce Rhode Island, George Panichas, who's one of our esteemed judges. They hosted the luncheon today. President of Commerce Rhode Island, Jim Bennett.
Thank you. You've heard me talk before, but sometimes they say that the United States is falling a little bit behind in startups and innovation, but let me tell you, let them come to Rhode Island. Let them come to Rhode Island. And the governor is always humble, and I have to say that he's overseen, we have the Commerce Corporation, but he's the chairman of Commerce. He's the chairman of Commerce. So all the deals that we've done in the last year or so, and a lot of early stage companies, has overseen. And it's become, he's using his skills. He was a small businessman. He knows how to make a payroll. He knows how to pivot when things are difficult, as we always have sometimes difficult problems in business. And for me, my gosh, I was an entrepreneur. I did 2 startups here in Rhode Island, and when I see these people, it kind of gets me excited. They've got the eye of the tiger. They've got the eye of the tiger, and we'd like to welcome you, have you come back, and I'd also like to thank George Panichas, who we brought in, and I would give George a hard time every day. He wanted to do this event, and he'd come in and say, "George, how's your thing going?" He goes, "It's not my thing. It's not my thing." I said, "Yes, George, it is your thing. It's not your thing if it's unsuccessful, but it's successful, so it is now your thing, George." So congratulations, and to the Fountain Blue Group. Let's do it again next year, and let's do it bigger and better. Thanks a lot.
Okay, last but not least, I'm going to say a few words, and then we're going to start our esteemed panels. And I'm going to lean, I'm not as agile as I used to be, so I'm going to lean on the boat, but I am so proud of Ben and the team. We were actually considering maybe having one of the panels or the judges sit in the boat. The liability waivers didn't cover that, but I'm going to lean on this boat because we are so excited about what Flux, Morini, and other companies are doing. For us, this isn't just another climate event. Our vision doing this was to really take a hard look as a Stocktake at where we are, what's working and what's not. You've heard my friend from the X Prize and many of the judges. These are people that are out there at the forefront of this, and we're trying to figure out, this isn't a moment really to totally reset. We just need to take a step back and rethink. And the world is moving fast. Low carbon plants, clean commodities, distributed energy, Schneider Electric in the back. Here in the US, we've argued while the power grid is breaking. And the grid doesn't care about your politics, it cares about if it works. We need bold, durable action. We need soil that stores carbon and makes farms more profitable. We need energy that powers data centers without blackout threats. We need policy that supports innovation and not confusion. You're gonna hear a lot about that in these panels in a little bit. You've already seen a bit of it from the heartbeat of innovation that has taken over the stage. But it's not about left or right. It's about forward or backwards. That's been the ethos of FountainHead, Rhode Island over the last decade. It's been the ethos of the work I've done at Grain Ecosystem, and it's at the core of all these companies that are exhibiting here in the room today. And this moment requires more than just knowing, it requires doing, action-oriented stuff. What Flux, Morini, and others are doing in building. We've got the tools, we've got the talent. As Congressman Amo said last year, we've got no time to waste. Let's remember, durability is a first-rate virtue, and the most successful ideas in business, in climate, and leadership, the ones that endure. This is a state that has endured for a long time. It was a manufacturing state originally. We're trying to go back to those roots and bring more companies here that want to manufacture and do great work. So let's get loud, let's get real. I know my friend Jeannie Sallow is going to help us get loud and real. And let's make this a moment where we stop talking about change and start driving it. Be kind, the original, create more than you consume, and never let the universe smooth you into your surroundings. If you play on the edges long enough, eventually you take the center. That's what we're doing here. It's still day one. The world is not waiting. Let's make it happen. Again, I'm proud to formally kick off the Stocktake. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our first panel of the day. So I asked the panelists to please come up. We're going to get the chairs set up, and we'll get this kicked off appropriately. So thanks for being here, everybody.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Patrick Crowley, and I am the president of the Rhode Island AFL-CIO. And we are starting off this panel with Navigating Energy Transition, a comprehensive strategy for Rhode Island, New England, and beyond. Now, my organization is the labor movement here in Rhode Island. You might be asking, why is the labor movement involved in a discussion like this? And from our point of view, it's very simple. Environmentalism without organized labor is gardening. The labor movement without the environmentalism in the business community is suicide. And when we think about the state of our country and we think about the state of the economy, Rhode Island is uniquely positioned to be a leader in the green economy. And you heard the governor talk about the steps we've taken over the last few years, and we've really been a national leader in this conversation, which is why the working men and women that I represent have an interest in it. But today we're going to hear from 4 very esteemed panelists that have a level of expertise in this area, especially at the intersection between economy, environmental protections, and what this new economy is going to look like. So let me please introduce to you, starting from my left, Nicole Verdi. Nicole is the Managing Director of Operations for NuGen Capital Management. To her left is Hannah Morini. She is the Vice President of Policy and Business Development for Green Development, LLC. Next to her is Ben Sorkin, the founder and CEO of Flux Marine. Oh, good, everyone has a mic now. And down at the end is my friend Jeff Diehl, who's the Chief Operating and Compliance Officer for the Coalition of Green Capital. So let's get into the conversation and see how much fun that we can have here. So Nicole, I'm going to start with you. How would you answer, how is the climate change uniquely impacting New England's coastal communities like Rhode Island? And are there regional solutions showing promise for resiliency and adaptation?
Can you guys hear me? Okay. So first of all, I want to say I work for NuGen Capital Management, but throughout the course of my career, it's really stemmed energy, environmental policy, and public service. And so I've been able to see firsthand from my different roles the impact that climate change is having in Rhode Island and New England. I had the opportunity to serve for Governor Raimondo as her Deputy Chief of Staff, where I focused on all things energy, environment, transportation, and public safety. I also then, after serving in that capacity, I stayed in public service and I worked for the state Senate. And my role there was legal, but also energy. And then before joining NuGen, I worked at Ørsted, so global leader of offshore wind. And in that role, I covered all of New England. And I can tell you, Pat, that climate change is significantly impacting the region. We're seeing the significant impacts in terms of the warming of the sea. We're seeing the impacts in terms of the rising sea levels. When I was in the governor's office, I would get calls from business owners saying, this is impacting my business, what are we going to do about it? And then in New England, unlike other parts of the country, we're some of the oldest parts of the country. And so our buildings are not as efficient, and they're beautiful and they're historic, and we want to ensure that they remain that way. But it's hard to make them energy efficient or to make sure that they're moving with the times as we accelerate the clean energy transition. And I would say we are in New England, though, really uniquely positioned to accelerate the transition to clean energy. And there are a few kind of like shining stars that I've already seen happen. So in New England, for offshore wind, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, they came together and issued a New England RFP for offshore wind. It's an example of 3 states coming together. And if you have any government experience, you know that it is not easy to get 3 states to come together to agree on anything, let alone put out an RFP, get responses to the RFP, and then coordinate in choosing a winner. But there's so many benefits to New England for that. There's benefits in terms of jobs. There's benefits in terms of efficiencies, cost savings for ratepayers. And so there's a real opportunity. New England has led the way, and I think we can continue to lead the way if the states collaborate and work together.
Great, thank you. I didn't just want to point out, I do have my offshore wind socks on. So despite the problems in that marketplace right now, we're still hoping beyond hope here in Rhode Island. Now, all right, for folks that aren't from Rhode Island, when I ask the next question, don't make fun of me. But Hannah, you're involved in a lot of work with something that we're hearing a lot about here at this Stocktake, something called biochar.
Biochar. It's
Biochar.
Exactly.
Let me say it a bit. Biochar.
Yeah.
I don't have an accent. Everyone else has the accent. But tell us a little bit more about that for folks that might not be familiar with it, and why would you say that this product has such potential for dealing with climate change and just potential opportunities around it?
Sure. So I'm Hannah. I work for Green Development, and we call it like our spin-off company is Quonset Soil Solutions. And so Green Development is a vertically integrated clean energy development company, and we've developed over 23 wind turbines in this state. We have over 150 megawatts of solar in our portfolio. We've done some batteries, and as part of our vertical integration, building everything ourselves, we have a forestry division. So we work on a lot of forest management contracts throughout the state. And what we've realized is that the wood chips are, in a lot of ways, considered a waste product. It's very difficult to properly dispose of the wood chips, and a lot of them either end up in the landfill, which emits greenhouse gases, or incinerated in biomass plants, which also is carbon negative. So we saw this as an opportunity to take some of the higher emitting aspects of our business and turn it into something carbon positive. So biochar, there's a lot of people in this room that have been in biochar much longer than I have, but I can give you the high level version of it. So biochar essentially is it's wood chip that is heated, very high heat, low oxygen, and it produces like a wood-based charcoal. And because there's no oxygen, it is not incineration. So instead of the carbon going up as ash, it is fixed into the product, and you get a very high in carbon, light, porous substance that can be used for many different things. We got to the list goes on, but you can use it for soil remediation, water filtration, cosmetics. You hear about like things like charcoal deodorant and like foot powder and things like that. That is biochar. You can use it as a component in steel and concrete and asphalt. It got to a point where we really had to pick one. And so we are making biochar, and we are combining it with compost that we're also making as well. So it benefits the environment in a few ways. One, it's a much more responsible way to use the wood chips. It is directly reducing the amount of synthetic fertilizer that's needed in soil. And it's directly sequestering carbon. It's something that we can use today as a shovel-ready carbon sequestration tool. You can buy a bag of it and put it in your garden tomorrow if you want. So it's something meaningful that we can do here in Rhode Island with something that's seen as a waste product.
That's excellent. Thank you very much for introducing us to that. My next question is for Ben, right next to you. You know, one of the opportunities I have in my role is I get to serve on a number of boards, and I serve on the Commerce Corporation board with President Bennett, and I know there's a number of other staff folks here from Rhode Island Commerce Corporation. And Ben, we've invested in your company because of, you know, we're very excited about the work that you're doing in Flux Marine and how much opportunity, you know, the state sees in businesses like yours. But I know as a startup company, you know, raising the capital to get going is one of the challenges. So what do you see as the fundraising environment for a company like yours here in Rhode Island and regionally? You know, what are the opportunities, what are the potential pitfalls that your growing organization is dealing with?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and for many of the entrepreneurs in the room, we did a pitch competition, so funding is important. We're constantly chasing funding. Every CEO is always fundraising. So that's a critical part of taking something and actually deploying it at scale is the fundraising piece of the puzzle. There are a lot of different ways we've approached it. There are ways that we've found in Rhode Island that work specifically well. And then there are opportunities that we see some other states doing that I think there are ways to catalyze more just very exciting facilitating capital. For one, passion. You know, for all the entrepreneurs out there, when you're looking for investors, the best investor is a passionate investor. And find what you're doing. They're sustainability investors. Here in Rhode Island, it's the ocean state, and we're building electric marine propulsion systems. So when it comes to finding passionate investors, we find people who care about the environment, love the water, and love boating. As I look around the room, I see our investors here. I see Steve Edelston, who was an early investor in Flux Marine, took a chance on a small company, a couple guys coming out of a garage, and that's grown tremendously. So finding passionate people in Rhode Island has definitely been a core part of what we're doing. Beyond that, working with groups like the Slater Technology Fund, which is a Rhode Island-based fund that's been super supportive. Thorne Sparkman, who's been out here. Rhode Island Commerce Corporation, especially early on, when you're bootstrapping, trying to attract that bigger capital in, we won a $50,000 innovation voucher that was non-dilutive, allowed us to build more prototypes, and ultimately attract close to $30 million of capital into the state from other investors. Now, in terms of $30 million is a lot, but it's not enough to change an entire industry. So as we're out raising more money and as other companies are raising more money, we look at what's worked and what are opportunities to amplify this existing funding. So I think there are states like Connecticut and New York and Mass that have dedicated a lot of funding, climate tech funds, $100, $200, $300 million funds to allow their companies to grow further, to grow faster. So trying to find some of the things like this and amplifying what Rhode Island has would be extremely catalytic. And then beyond that, funding for deployments. I think Massachusetts does this particularly well. They have programs like Amplify Mass, Innovate Mass, and for Rhode Island to be able to tag on to some of those, I think we can do some incredible things. For example, if we had a program to fund, say, 50 electric boats, all of a sudden, look at 50 aquaculture boats, 50 fishing boats in Rhode Island that could be electric, it would put Rhode Island on the map. So I think there are opportunities to follow some of that. And then the last piece of the puzzle that I see is an untapped potential are foundations. If you look at a foundation, Rhode Island Foundation, for example, it's a $1 billion foundation, making it close to $100 million in grants last year, and the rest of the money they're generally investing to continue to grow the foundation. I think there are a lot of foundations, and there should be a subset of the funding from these foundations that's not grant and not kind of low yield investments, but high potential yield, targeted impact investments. And if a group like the Rhode Island Foundation could, take $50 million out of the $1 billion and say, we're going to invest this in high impact companies, not only could they help Rhode Island companies grow, but they can also create outsized returns, especially in the climate space, because there's a lot of money to be made in climate. So overall, Rhode Island, for those who are visiting, it's been extremely helpful, but there are a lot of really exciting ways that I think we can continue to amplify capital and help attract more companies and grow not just a handful of exciting companies, but build hundreds of companies and billion-dollar companies here.
Incredible. I think it really talks a lot about the investment that the state of Rhode Island is making in this sector of the economy. But speaking of that, Jeff, from your point of view, how could private capital start to really get deeper involved in the renewable energy sector and building a carbon neutral, carbon free economy, whether it's here in Rhode Island working with companies like Ben or just in general, from your point of view? What do you think?
Great, thanks. I think somebody needs to turn down their microphones. Sorry. Yeah, thanks, Patrick. I mean, I'm at Coalition for Green Capital, just by way of background. We were one of the, we've been around for about 15 years advocating in this space, advocating for a national green bank, more funding into this area broadly from the government. We were an awardee in the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. We received $5 billion from the National Clean Investment Fund. And we looking to deploy that. Part of our business model also is developing a local green bank in all 50 states. And so far we've capitalized 36. We're almost there. Still working on the other 14, plus some of the territories. I know we're also involved in the Puerto Rico Green Bank as well. So part of that is building this ecosystem where we can not only do larger national and regional projects, which we're focusing on, but also bringing that down into the local level. So you think about a company that is deploying electric school bus charging as a service across the country. Those are all little individual projects. And so while we can front that with the company, we can also bring that to the local banks who can then provide that and through a standardized documentation and loan product, we can then turn around and take those to the capital markets and fund those with capital markets investors and recycle that capital that we're receiving from the federal government and that we're deploying into the local green banks in a much faster way. And so our target is we've received $5 billion. We've invested a significant number in local green banks. We're looking over the next 3 to 5 years to invest $8 billion of our capital and mobilizing roughly $40 billion plus of private sector. And again, part of it is being additional to transactions, doing parts of transactions that are more difficult for financial institutions to do, for the banks, for private lenders. Still at market rates, so we're not providing subsidized rates into these transactions, but again, trying to take risks that the private sector either doesn't really want to do or prices it in such a way that becomes uneconomic. And so we're able to provide that bridge and also do some things that then bring in those private sector investors after us into transactions. So that's a lot of what we're trying to do is we try to mobilize as much capital into this space because we know what's available from both federal and state and local governments is nowhere near enough to drive what we're trying to do with regards to a clean energy transition.
While you're talking about the capital side of things, and I often think of the labor side of things, one of the ideas that I've been kicking around, the AFL-CIO in the late 1960s started a housing investment trust to invest union pension money in building affordable housing for working class communities across the country. I've mentioned this idea to my national president, Liz Schuler. How cool would it be to create an AFL-CIO environmental investment trust where we're leveraging union pension funds, state-based pension funds, so that we can continue to invest in the green economy? From my point of view, making sure that it's built union, but also being able to fit at one level of the capital stack where private philanthropy or private businesses or state investments might not be able to invest in that certain way. So that's an idea for anyone else to try to run with and figure out how we do that. But so far, we've heard about the intersection really between private sector and public sector when it comes to working on developing what this economy is going to look like. Nicole, you've worked in both sides of the street there, with both in tremendous public sector service and private sector experience. From your point of view, what can the state or other governments do to continue to accelerate that kind of investment in this sector of the economy? But also, how can the state help drive this renewable sector so that it's shared equitably throughout various communities? So this isn't just a wealthy endeavor, but this is something that's going to make an impact on working class Rhode Islanders' day-to-day lives.
So I'd say a few things in response to that. One of the reasons why I chose a career in clean energy is because it's complex and I love solving problems. And if you've worked in clean energy, whether it's clean energy tech, whether it's offshore wind, whether it's biochar, whether it's the investment part of it, you will know that it is incredibly difficult. And once you start to tackle a problem, when you pull at one string, then you realize there's repercussions or there's some other problem that comes next. It's not, if it was easy, anyone would do it and it would all be solved by now. And when you're dealing with something that is so complex, it can't be done by one entity. Government's not going to solve the problem when it comes to accelerating the clean energy transition. Companies alone are not going to solve the problem. When you think of utilities, and the utilities play a really important part when you're thinking about climate tech, clean energy transition, et cetera. Like, everyone plays an important part, and we really need everyone to be rowing in the same direction. And it's an exciting time for me to be at NuGen. So we, not only do we invest in clean energy, but we also develop, own, and operate clean energy, more specifically solar and storage in the Northeast region and beyond. And so one of the things that we're looking at right now is how can we partner with utilities and government, maybe on new technology that's coming out that might be a little bit more risky. And so the government might at this time not want to take a chance, but maybe if you partner with the private sector, there might be a way to really move the needle. But you also want to make sure you're not leaving the utility behind because they play such a key and important part. And government has to send those signals, though. The private sector alone, if we say we want to do something, it can't just be, oh, you're coming at it because you want to make a profit. And yes, companies need to do well, but we need to get signals from the government, signals from utilities, and then we can go towards some of those signals, invest our resources, be partners with the government. And I've seen that happen in certain ways, and I think more of that, more of allowing government, utilities, and business owners to be around the table together and brainstorm. We're seeing a gap here. There's too much load demand here. There's not enough load demand there. Oh, we're really having a trouble when it comes to, mid to heavy duty vehicles. Is there a way private sector can be a part of that? NuGen also works on trying to get more mid to heavy duty vehicles, and we can do some creative financing. And we actually partnered with a California company and FedEx to really do some creative financing so we could help put more mid to heavy duty vehicles. But there was incentives from the government that allowed that to be possible. So it's like getting the signals from the government, and then the government, private sector, and other bodies, whether that be utilities or academic institutions or labor, working together, I think is really important, and it can unlock a lot of potential.
Yeah, Patrick, if I could also expand on that. I mean, my experience as the former CEO of Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank, so working at the intersection of public sector and finance. But, as you know, one of your colleagues at the AFL-CIO is on our board, and we are committed to workforce development and apprenticeships, as well as 50% of our investment in disadvantaged communities. But more importantly, I think even beyond just incentives from the government, there are things like there are a significant number of barriers that Nicole talked a little bit about getting everybody around the table. Well, let's look at what are some of the barriers that we have from the utilities in terms of tie-ins. What about the permitting from governments? We're working on a pretty significant transmission line in terms of the not ready to proceed financing. Again, an area where banks are a little bit reluctant to go. But again, speeding up some of that permitting enables some of these transactions to move forward more expeditiously and make them more economic for all parties, not only the developers, but also those that are on the receiving end. And I think that's a very key component of where government, utilities, and business can come together. Another thing that we're looking at as well is we've capitalized a green reinsurance company, which can also address some of these things like electric vehicle residual value risk, which is again another thing that certainly in this environment can be very important from a financer's point of view, from the private sector as well. So I think there's a lot of things that are not just incentives that government can be doing to make this transition easier to easier to realize.
I think you're absolutely right, Jeff. And you know, we were at the luncheon today that Commerce Corporation had. I was talking with my new friend Mark Smith, who flew in, and as he was landing at TF Green, noticed how forested Rhode Island really is. No one would have thought that might have been a barrier to the green economy, but I see in the back my friend Nick Nybo, who represents Verdi Energy, a solar developer in the state. And for years, they were playing in this marketplace, but also had a concern about deforestation. Not just because deforestation is a bad thing, but it impacts their ability to be players in the marketplace. So to your point, Jeff and Nicole, you know, Chris Kearns here, the director of the Office of Energy Resources in the state, worked with his team and Nick and the electricians union to make sure that the General Assembly enacted legislation so that we could continue to develop this industry here in the state, being mindful of protecting the core forests that we have, but also making it available to be in, you know, making this segment of the marketplace something that people could invest in. And I don't know if the governor is still here. You know, great thanks to Governor McKee for really setting the tone. But for all of you that are from out of state, I mean, one of the great things about Rhode Island is we really do know everyone. But it does help to be able to put people around the table, like you're both saying, to figure out the solutions so that we can continue to develop in this part of the area. You know, but, you know, Ben, your company is based in Bristol, Rhode Island. But Narragansett Bay is an asset to the entire region. So from your point of view, as someone who's chose to develop in Bristol, what other areas around the region and what kind of a regional focus might we consider, or what would you think would be most beneficial to companies like yours and others that want to get involved in this area of the market?
I think it's almost less about focusing on specific regions and more about connecting the regions that we already have. I think where I am in Bristol, Unity Park, a lot of companies are coming there. Commerce has been supportive of it, growing. There are multinational defense companies setting up. There are startups coming there as well. But to get from Quonset Point, where Regent is and a lot of other cool companies, to Bristol is not always fun. It takes a while. How could it be more fun? The answer is right there. That's my commuter.
I was just going to say, electric boats to take you from one place to the other, right?
Exactly.
Electric ferries.
Rhode Island is the ocean state. We have this incredible bay that's right in the middle. And to get from place to place by boat is an incredible opportunity that I think we should look more at taking advantage of. It takes me 22 minutes to get from my house in East Greenwich to my office in Bristol. That's extremely quick. And the bay is so empty. I'd like to see more boats, more sustainable boats out there. And all of a sudden, if you have boats in all these places, and you know, you don't need to commission multi-million-dollar ferries, but even thinking about Uber boats in a way. If we could be quickly connecting people from Bristol to Quonset to Providence to East Providence, you really start this interconnectedness that I think will accelerate Rhode Island. Look how much time people spend in cars. It's difficult to be super productive when you're in cars, and I've never gotten out of the car after an hour-long commute and said, wow, that was a great hour. But I've certainly had commutes in a boat where I stop halfway and I say, I cannot believe that this is the state I live in, and this is the state I'm building a company in. So I think when it comes to those regions, there are a lot of people focusing on different regions within Rhode Island, and we need to keep setting these up, but we need to focus on the interconnectedness of those regions, and I think that'll open more and more doors, and just be known for this bay. And one of the dreams that I've talked about is right now, if I'm talking to an investor and I say I'm going to be in the Bay Area, of course, San Francisco, 5-10 years from now, I want to talk to investors and say, I'm going to be in the Bay Area, and they're going to say, which one? In San Francisco or the Rhode Island Bay Tech area? So let's make it interconnected, and let's make the Rhode Island Bay Area the future of just technology and innovation.
Yeah, that's right. Let's give it up for that. You know, Quonset Point is really such a gem in our economic ecosystem here in the state. And Hannah, I know Quonset Soil Development is key to that. You know, how do you see your company using the assets that the state of Rhode Island has, in particular, so that the biochar industry that you're trying to build and develop can be something that not is maybe headquartered in Rhode Island, but could be used as an expansion, throughout New England or throughout the country?
It's a great question. So we are very thankful to have the opportunity to build our first project in Quonset. It's very easy to work there, very easy, streamlined to permit projects. You know what the process is at the onset, which is it should be more custom than it actually is, customary than it is. So we are very thankful to be there, and we envision our first project, our wood biochar project, to be our pilot project. We are looking to not only build additional wood biochar facilities on the East Coast, but we're looking to also build other pyrolysis facilities on the East Coast as well. So we talked a lot earlier about, I talked about biochar itself. That's one of the opportunities, but then the pyrolysis process has a lot of benefits as well. Because of the high heat, it has the ability to destroy the forever chemicals that we're hearing about now. Things that have been involved in PFAS, things that have been involved in non-stick and textiles for a very long time. It also has the ability to help bind heavy metals so that those aren't going into soils, not available to plants. So we're very thankful that Quonset had space for us and they've been excellent partners. I wish there were more Quonsets, not only in Rhode Island, but Quonset itself should be a model to other states as far as great ways to welcome businesses and create opportunities.
I'm glad you brought up the PFAS issue, because I know our General Assembly's been trying to tackle that.
Yes.
And from my point of view, one of the reasons why it's important to have the labor movement involved in this conversation, most people don't know, but the firefighting equipment that firefighters wear to go into fires is loaded with PFAS.
Yep.
And there's also a extraordinarily higher occurrence of cancer with firefighters than the general population. So when you think about why working Rhode Islanders care about environmental change, it's not just because we want to save our forests, not just because we want cleaner air, it's because the current way of doing business is literally killing working Rhode Islanders.
Yes.
So thank you for bringing it up. Now, a question for all of you, and we can maybe just go down the line here. We've been talking about how great everything is. And that's part of our job. I mean, I see Jimmy Bennett here. He's our salesperson in chief for the state and one of our biggest cheerleaders, and he does a great job at that. But what are the obstacles? What are the things that are holding us back? And what do you think we can do as a community, whether it's the business community, the labor community, the larger Rhode Island community, to try to remove the barriers that might be in place to really having the ocean state be the hub of this transition to a green economy? Nicole, why don't you go first?
I'm going to say something that's been mentioned before, but just kind of emphasize it. Development is really difficult. Whether you are developing clean energy, whether you're developing and adding an addition to your house, whether you're trying to put a new building for a restaurant, like development in Rhode Island, and to be honest, New England, but definitely Rhode Island, is really incredibly difficult. And there are barriers in terms of being able to have known what is going to happen and be known and understood all across the state. In Rhode Island, we're too small to have, if you try to get something permitted in Charlestown, you have to go through a whole set of rules and regulations versus if you're trying to get something permitted in Johnston. And there are very differences between the communities here in Rhode Island in terms of openness to development. And clean energy is development. And so being able to work statewide and making it easier to permit and develop. I know it is something that the governor, I have the opportunity to sit on a land use commission with the House. I know it's something that the speaker is really important to the speaker. And I'd love to see other state agencies working as well. There's Commerce, I think, sits on the land use commission. I know that Director Gray from DEM sits on the land use commission, but trying desperately to remove some of the barriers in terms of making it easier and also more predictable would be huge in terms of really moving the needle on accelerating clean energy in Rhode Island.
I agree with everything you just said. The only way we're going to continue to develop a robust, clean economy here is to make sure that everything's on the table, right? We need to pursue every opportunity, not just our current favorites, right? Like we need offshore wind, we need land-based solar, we need land-based wind, we need all the efficiency, and we need carbon sequestration. And we need the opportunity to pursue what's best in the circumstances. And yes, it's true, there are a lot of barriers, and I think that, Quonset is so special because because a lot of those barriers that Nicole just mentioned are not there. A lot of the groundwork for permitting has been done already, and Rhode Island has the opportunity because of our size to help streamline some of those processes and make the whole state somewhat, at least maybe not as easy because not everything belongs everywhere, but make it streamlined and clear what we need to do in order to pursue all the opportunities that are worth pursuing. There are barriers, and but part of the reason that we made this big pivot into biochar is because it became so difficult to just focus on solar and wind here in this state. So, any clean energy opportunity that's available in Rhode Island, we will pursue it.
And same question to you.
Red tape and technology demonstrations. Those are the two things that I think can accelerate Rhode Island all the way through. Thinking about red tape, getting permits, how difficult it is to get a permit. You know what doesn't need a permit? Nor'easters, hurricanes. These things are coming immediately, so we need to respond with that same immediacy. I've talked to boat owners who have trouble getting lifts approved to have on their dock. They want a lift on the dock because the boats need toxic bottom paint, and they don't want to have to use toxic bottom paint. So why is it so difficult to get a lift approved? Even things like solar, turning on solar. I've talked to homeowners. I've personally had a struggle getting solar at my house turned on because of miscommunications between utilities, private entities, scheduling conflicts. That's close to 10 megawatt hours of energy that was lost in some of these conversations. So cutting through red tape, and folks like Jim Bennett, I get on the phone with Jim, and Jim says, what do we need to do to accelerate things? How do we move faster? So it's that mentality that we need more of. And then deployment of technologies. I think we heard a lot of really cool people up here earlier. Biochar, how do I get biochar? How do I get involved in that sort of thing? And if we can find ways to get small-scale funding to do small-scale deployments of this technology, that's then a signal to the world that, hey, this is ready, this works, and now it's time to scale. So again, how do we accelerate these things? We cut through red tape, and we support pilot projects.
Yeah, I think the other thing that we haven't really addressed today is how do we also ensure a just transition? And I think one of the things we've got small heat pump programs that the state is running. We've got some new solar for all funding that the state is running. We've brought a developer in to do some things at the edges. But the state can't do it on its own. And how do we drive, not discussion, but action that is the true partnership between the public sector and the private sector? Because again, there are a number of residents, a number of businesses out there that can benefit from this, right? When we talk, whether it was at the Infrastructure Bank or at Coalition for Green Capital or CGC, we don't just talk about the environmental impact of what we're doing. It's about economic impact, right? Strong economic impact. We're saving people and businesses and municipalities money by the projects that we're doing. And yet, not everybody can benefit from that. And there are certainly a number of ways that we can be doing this, but we really do need the private sector better engaged, or perhaps the state and the communities better engaged with the private sector to drive a lot of this. And I think that's one of the bridges that we're trying to bring at CGC, to bring that together, to ensure that we do have a just transition and that everybody benefits from this.
So I've had the opportunity to do a number of these panels in the last couple of years now, and one of the questions that I was asked once really hit home, so I'm going to ask all of you to try to take a shot at it. Rhode Island set a goal of by 2050 we'll have a net zero economy, that we're going to work deliberately by the state driving the market to decarbonize our entire economy. What does that look like for you? So imagine it's 2050 and we've hit our goals. What does that look like? Whether it's for you as an individual, for the state, for your company, but when we get to this point, what's the one thing that you would like to be able to say, this took place because of what Rhode Island is doing today in 2025?
That's a great question. I feel like naming one thing is the hard part for me because I want to list off all the things that I think we would be doing and could be doing. I would say I'll answer in two parts. For NuGen, we want to be part of the solution. So we want to be helping the state meet its goals, whether that is investing in mid to heavy duty vehicles to get more of them on the street. We know that is difficult. We know it has been a problem. We'd love to partner with whether it's DOT, big companies, et cetera. Like, we want to help make that happen. Working on trying to make sure large rooftops have solar. We understand we don't want to cut down trees, so we want to try to develop solar everywhere we can in Rhode Island that makes sense. I want to see NuGen part of the solution. I think overall, one of the things that is the most difficult in New England, and I mentioned this when I answered the first question, that kind of keeps me up at night is the historic and old buildings that we have here and getting them to be electrified. I do think that needs to be part of the 2050 vision in order to accomplish it. And it is hard. It is not an easy thing to do. A lot of the low-hanging fruit has already been done, and we want to preserve these beautiful buildings, but we need to invest. If we're going to get all of our buildings to be electrified and energy efficient, we need to invest. And so that's one big thing that we haven't really talked about today that I'd like to see done in order to accomplish the goals of the 2050 vision.
So the same thing goes for our utility infrastructure. It is very old. It looks very similar to what it looked like when it was invented. Rhode Island Energy is investing a lot more time and resources into upgrades than its predecessor, but there's still a lot of work to do. And one thing that I think would change everything immediately is the ability to incorporate storage like now, right? So the single biggest barrier to developing renewables in the state now is the fact that it takes 4 or 5 years to get through your utility study, whereas a few years ago it took 3 months. We built the 7 wind turbines in Johnston. It took 120 days for our utility study, and we were mad about it because they needed to do a detailed study on that. So it took 4 months for the study. The last one took 4.5 years. And I think it's because everything is being studied as like worst case scenario. So they're assuming that every single solar system that's online is going to be exporting at the worst time to do it. When to me, nothing is simple, but it would be wonderful if we could say, hey, it's the lowest load of the entire year. You cannot export your solar generation right now. It has to go into a battery or you need to shut down for a little while. And that would allow us to say, hey, we're not going to go into this transmission study. We don't need to go into a transmission study. We're going to keep everything down here, distribution level, where it's needed. Store it in the battery, and you export it when it's needed instead. So instead of studying worst case scenario, you're studying realistic. And one thing that would help battery storage and help the design is time of use pricing. That's the biggest thing to incite the most change as soon as possible, because everyone's behavior is based around the price that they're paying for their utilities. So this is not biochar related, but that's what I would do. I would do time of use pricing tomorrow.
I think everything you just said is exactly what we need. You know, you talk about the challenges in transmission. How do you get around those challenges? Distributed energy generation, distributed energy storage, and time of use pricing. Those things will drive so much excitement and adoption. So I think what you said, that is 2050. That's how we get there. And then there are a lot of things that add on to that. As I think about more microgrids, I think about marinas that are full of electric boats in 2050. Those are 10 megawatt hour size microgrids. The total use of a boat, you're not using it that much realistically on a day-to-day basis. So that's an incredible amount of storage that if you have time of use pricing, all of a sudden marinas will start doing more and more of that. And think about who's funding marinas now. You know, a lot of this comes back to funding. Safe Harbor was just bought by, I believe it was BlackRock for $5+ billion. There's so much money going into marinas and real estate. And if you can combine real estate with energy generation, storage, time of use, and arbitrage, you're opening the door for incredible amounts of investment that will define a clean economy in 2050. So, uptick what you said.
Yeah, well, unlike the rest of my panel members, I hope I'm here in 2050. It's a long ways for me. But I think there's really two things that we need to do. One, we're not going to get there with the existing technology. It's too expensive, doesn't operate at the optimal way that we need to be, but that doesn't mean we have to stop. So I think we need to continue to pursue the existing technologies, broader deployment, but we've got to get everybody with a can-do attitude. And we talked a little bit about, it takes 120 days to do a study. It took 4 years before that. We're getting there. The utilities need to study this problem, and they hopefully our new, hopefully the soon-to-be, I guess was approved today. The new member of the PUC will also help us cut through some of that red tape. But I think, again, we need to have everybody aligned with we've got to get there. We can't hesitate. We can't continue to do the exhaustive studying that we're doing. That's a barrier. It doesn't mean that we don't do the studying. We've just got to get it done faster. And we've got to have that can-do attitude. At the same time, we need to continue to invest in emerging technologies. And what I'd like to see is Rhode Island, exactly what you said before, the Bay Area with regards to technology and innovation, because we've got to get there. We've got to invest more in technology. We've got to get those breakthroughs that'll really help us drive down the cost, improve the economics of this transition.
Great. So we have time for a couple of questions from the audience. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and we'll have someone bring over a microphone to ask it. So I know this isn't a shy group. And I used to be a teacher, so don't make me call on you. No? Everyone's hit their limit? One question.
Hi. I was curious, when you're talking about your visions for 2050, where do you see some of the working together and sort of that, I guess what comes to mind is like coalition building, but where do you see that originating? Like, do you see that coming from legislative action or from the utility or from the PUC and the regulatory sphere? How do we get all of these parties on the same page and rowing in that same direction to 2050, but also to the interim goals?
That's a fabulous question. I'll start, and then if other... So I'll use the offshore wind example where the 3 New England states have worked together, and honestly, it's continued and grown. Now, actually, I think it's 12 or 13 states in the northeastern region are working on transmission and regional coordination on transmission. And I do think states should be driving the coordination. I also, though, would love to see, I think if states drive the coordination, then the utilities want to, if a regulator is saying this is important, a utility wants to do what the regulator says important, because the regulator approves the utilities rates and approves the utilities bills. So I think if states and regulators push this collaboration, the utilities are going to want to do it. I think the private sector is begging for this coordination and begging to be part of it. And so I think if states and utilities were to lead, the private sector, advocacy organizations, grassroots, labor, I definitely think would participate. But I think the states and the utilities really need to lead because it involves so much coordination on a regional and even broader base. I don't know if other folks.
I would just say that in order for states and regulators to lead our industry, we need to make sure that we're all on the same page and we all have the same goals and we're working towards the same thing. Sometimes things feel a little bit disjointed, and I think it's just we need to make sure that we are all in agreement on what the path is and how to get there.
I think the other thing is, while I do think that we need the public sector to help to start these coalitions, I think once we get the engine moving, they got to get out of the way.
I agree with all that. Coalitions, task force, right people in the right place, and just moving fast. The private sector is begging for stuff like that.
Okay, anyone else? Yes.
Hi, thanks for a great conversation and a great panel, by the way. This has been really enlightening. I remember at one point a little bit earlier, the word insurance was mentioned. And something that I'm currently looking into is the effect of having or not having insurance and reinsurance on some of these deployments for climate tech. So in my context, it would be a larger facility, a plant or something, but having the right kinds of insurance is also important for deploying solar panels on an old building or trying to get your biochar facility up and running. So how do you see the insurance market as like a collaborator in this mix of people that are all going to have to work together? How do we get them on board?
Well, I think there's two components to the insurance market. One is, to a certain degree, your typical insurance policy and typical insurance companies that in many ways aren't properly pricing risk. Part of that's a competitive situation. They're in many ways they're also not taking some of that risk and prefer to exit the market. Right? So you think you own a home on the water here, getting flood insurance is pretty difficult. In Florida, you can't get it. Disaster insurance in some markets, you can't get it at all anymore. But there are those, that's one of the things that's always been a challenge in this market is, and even more so in the climate resiliency market, the adaptation, not so, in the mitigation to a certain degree, adaptation market is, what's the source of payment for projects, whether it's at the residential level, at the municipal level, at the state level. But part of that is the mortgage market and the insurance market isn't properly pricing risk. And then, so therefore, there isn't the incentive to do some of these. They're contributing to the uneconomics or the difficult economics in some of these projects. The other is what I was talking about, which is the business side, the insuring things like, if you've got a private sector lender to do, or even NuGen is a perfect example of doing electric vehicles, whether they're school buses, trucks, cars. You've got significant residual risk, right? In the internal combustion engine market, you've got a pretty good market. It's been around for a while. The electric vehicle market, residual value is still riskier. And so if we can provide insurance on that value and consolidate some of that risk and manage it better from a diversified point of view, it then drives the economics down, or greater certainty for private sector lenders like a NuGen or others that are involved in this market. And then also providing other, you touched on a couple things, is the, putting solar panels on a roof, is the risk of the roof and the building is different than the performance of the panels, right? And that's where CGC is the company that we've capitalized. Those are the types of risks that we're looking to help the market manage and help private sector investors by bringing them in by reducing their risk and therefore reducing the cost of the financing.
The one thing that I would add, and I don't know if you guys have seen this, but as the market has been around longer, there are certain insurance providers who are starting to specialize in clean energy. And so they are starting and trying to understand the work that we're doing better and then give us better pricing. And so if you're looking for, like, you can come talk to me after if you're looking for some companies. We have an amazing provider that I could not speak more highly of that is known for its insurance for clean energy. And so when we talk to it, we're having like detailed conversations and they know the intricacies of our business that helps when it comes to getting insurance for our entire solar and storage portfolio.
Well, great. Everyone, let's give our panelists a round of applause, saying thank you for a great conversation, and look forward to having continued conversations for the rest of the evening, and I'm going to turn things back over to Jason.
Thank you, Patrick. And again, big round of applause for the panelists. Critical topic, and all of them are doing really important things in the state and beyond. So that was insightful. What we're going to do now is take a 15-minute break to give everybody a chance to stretch your legs, check out some of the incredible things on the exhibition floor. We want to give the panelists an opportunity to mingle and also answer some questions. I see a little bit of a line forming here. And then we will begin the second panel, and then we will do the announcement of the winners. And food, in the process, food will also start to be served for those of you that are hungry. So enjoy the room. We're going to get set up for the next panel, and we'll see you in a little bit.